Dr. Greg, so happy and it's just a pleasure to have you on our show. Welcome to Relationship Renegades.
Woo!
Well, my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be on your radio show today with you.
Absolutely.
Yes, and this is a really important one because so many people, especially in relationships, it's really hard to have a great relationship if you feel really crappy. And I know for a fact, I wouldn't have found Emilio or been able to make this relationship work so well if it weren't for the understanding and the teachings that you guys teach at Neurohacker Collective.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love so much about Neurohacker is you guys are looking at things from, in a very, how everything affects everything in a very like complexity science type of way, which I think a lot of people just miss. I know I did for most of my life and I'm still fascinated by that concept. And so we're going to get into like a deep dive of such amazing questions. But for people that are just, tuning in, we say neurohacker and neurotropics. Can you give like a quick summary for people who might be listening on what neurotropics actually are?
Sure. So in a general sense, nootropics are things that, going back, I guess, to the movie Limitless, right?
Yeah.
The idea, and that really was the main character took a pill and it made his brain just work much, much better. So nootropics don't quite do that, actually probably not even in the same zip code, but there are things that when we take, they help our brain to perform better. And when our brain performs better, that can help us in things we classically think of with the brain. So, executive function and memory. But there's this entire domain of the brain called social cognition, which contains empathy, our ability to be in touch with our own emotions, and then be able to read the emotions, facial gestures, expressions on other people. So that piece, social cognition, is almost never talked about. Mm-hmm. But nootropics also, in my opinion, have the, at least, ability to impact that cognitive bucket as well. So to me, nootropics are really anything that can make our brain perform better in any of these tasks that we rely on our brain to do every day.
Yeah, I think that's so fantastic. And I definitely want to, throughout the show, dive deeper on that social cognition, not only because I think it's a key, one of the key things, especially in the world that we live in today. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that Rachel and I have really appreciated and really grown to love, because in 2016, so I've been biohacking for probably 9+ years now. Back when I used to do coaching years ago, it was like one of the first, certified bulletproof coaches out there. And a bunch of other certifications. But, during that time, being kind of a guinea pig for my mind and body, at that time, it was just like, focus and crazy cognitive performance. At the time, I didn't really appreciate all the things that Neurohacker Collective and all the products that they have, the balance of things, the whole ecosystem, how things kind of work hand in hand together. And ultimately the philosophy of Qualia, which, if I remember correctly, is really, at the end of it, the core of making you just the better version of who you really are. And I think that aligns well with Relationship Renegades, because to me, it's like, it's semantics. So it's making a better version of you, but it's really, to us, the way that I would translate that in Relationship Renegades is that you're kind of finally being you, actually, mm-hmm. in my opinion, right? It's just, given the concrete jungle that we live in right now, whether it's the bad EMFs or the pollution or the lack of sleep or whatever it may be, interior and exteriorly, it's like these things help to really harmonize, I guess in your guys' words, which I love, the mind, the body, mm-hmm. the relationships, the environment, these pillars of Qualia, to really finally like be who you really are. And like Rachel said, finally be able to show up, mm-hmm. whether you're dating or show up in your marriage or show up in your business. I think sometimes, unfortunately, we need, whether they're products, services, or technologies, that kind of bridge the gap between, ancient wisdom and modern technology, or, modern supplementation, et cetera. So I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, I don't need this or that. But it's like, man, we don't live in a perfect world and we're stressed like completely. So I feel like, I digress, but I love that you guys are all about making a better version of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And really, and I guess the way that I would say it, finally finding who I really am, and this being able to assist with that. So I just want to say that I love the philosophy of Qualia, and that's one of the many reasons why
and really
we wanted you guys
as
on the
show. Not just Qualia, but I think a big question that I have for you guys so not just like a supplement company, right? Because I want people to understand that this podcast, this radio show isn't like, hey, let's just promote a bunch of this supplement company. It's really about this lifestyle and looking at life and health in a completely different way, full of all of the complexities that it is. And you guys have those 4 main pillars that you have. Can you talk about those pillars and why you guys chose those specific ones in this holistic approach to health?
Well, so I guess like stepping back a second, so Neurohacker Collective was actually birthed by 2 brothers and one of their friends. And the main reason, and the person's now our CEO, is he cooked himself at a pretty young age because he could do more, he did do more, and then ultimately ran himself ragged, right? So, when that happens, what I've seen is people crash hard typically, right? And it takes a while to recover. So he did a lot of things to recover and, ultimately got his brain and body working really at a high level again, and wanted to see if there was a way to deliver some of that experience to more people. What he did was a lot of IV nutrition and a lot of biohacking, right? And so Neurohacker Collective was birthed to be able to bring the biohacking message, but then technologies, whether it's supplements or making people aware of other technologies that can help bridge the gap and get you to be able to perform at a higher level. So supplementation is, one of the main things we do, but it's not our mission per se. Our mission is to help our tribe, which is a lot larger than the people that buy supplements from us, be aware of the cool things and people we come across that may help them in their journey to become higher performers.
And what have you guys found, especially in according to relationships, that has been most beneficial, like to your tribe and to, Neurohacker as a whole, whether it's different like self-care or communication or, shifting perceptions? Is there anything, I know it's a loaded question, but is there anything that we can discuss that we can share with our audience that you guys have found to be really pivotal in helping people have healthier, more connected, fully alive relationships?
So the place I would start, and so one of the things I invariably come back to when it comes to Neurohacker Collective is all of the early products that I was involved in creating have a unifying theme of energy. Like essentially making it so whether it's our brain, our mitochondria, whatever, can produce more energy. And in the simplest sense, everything the brain does requires some degree of energy, right? Because it's doing work. It just makes sense. And these different cognitive skills that I mentioned earlier, often like if you look in a medical textbook, you'll see, the brain in the middle and then surrounding it, memory over here and executive function here and social cognition and language and visual motor skills, right? But the truth is they function more in a hierarchy. So things like executive function, social cognition, they take more energy, so they're harder to get to, would be the simple story. And so I often talk about a pyramid. They would just be higher up the pyramid. And what happens if we have more mental energy available, then our brain can get and do more of these things that are up the pyramid more. And so executive function, so these are things like your ability to set goals and plan and do good things and have the willpower or cognitive resources to not do things that aren't good for you. Executive function also has to do with cognitive flexibility. So being able to literally change our mind or change our point of view, which, obviously in today's world, we see a real lack of that, right? Like people get really fixated in their point of view. So executive function, if we don't have the mental energy to get there and stay there a good part of our day, we can't expect people to operate from that level. And social cognition, I think for most people, seems to be even higher on that pyramid. So like my experience.
Can you break down social cognition for people that are listening that might be like, explain that deeper. What is that exactly?
Social cognition. So what, within neuroscience, they'll usually talk about groups of tasks the brain does. So like an individual skill could be empathy. Another skill might be reading facial expressions and body languages. And a third skill might be the ability to check in and see like what we're feeling, like what's going on emotionally within our body. So that collection of skills is termed social cognition. right? So anything that's in that social emotional bucket. Executive function would be another grouping of skills that have to do with, like I said, planning. Then the attentional bucket has to do with things like focus, avoiding distraction. So each of these cognitive domains has a group of skills that fit, within it, right? It's really a model for how neuroscientists approach the brain. But what tends to happen, so think of like your average person that goes to work at 9 a.m, works super hard, right? Like their brain is just, doing all these things across the day, all of which take mental energy, right? So, and then maybe have to drive, you're in the LA area, right? Yeah. So, probably crazy traffic to drive from wherever that was home to their loved ones. And so by the time they get home at the end of the day, they've literally used up most, if not all, of the mental energy reservoir that they started the day with. And so what happens fairly frequently is the best version of us showed up at the office and in those relationships, and we literally don't have the mental energy to be that best version of ourselves when we get home.
Oh, that's so.
Right? So that's super common, right? Like we all, we've either personally experienced that, or we certainly know couples that that's a challenge for. Yeah. And so when I said, one of the unifying themes of, creating products at Neurohacker Collective is this theme of energy. So Qualia Mind was very much produced the same with Qualia Life as things that produce more energy. The idea being, if you have more reserves, we end up being better versions of ourselves for more of our waking hours. So my personal experience of Qualia Mind, I always had a great memory, so I couldn't move the needle much there, didn't really experience that. But about 6 weeks after starting it initially, it dawned on me driving home in traffic one night that I was way more patient with traffic and with people cutting me off. And, I do a lot socially at night, or did before all the lockdowns. And so one of the things I did every Tuesday was trivia in a loud bar. And there was times I would be cooked going into it, and just my patience for, people saying stupid things instead of the right answer, we love, right?
Were you good at that trivia at the bar? I was horrible at those.
I'm good in certain areas and horrible in others. But certainly I have a well-rounded group that I used to participate with. So I'm great at Greek mythology and, sports, geography, things like that. But if you ask me anything about, like what was in, like pop culture things or modern music, I have no shot. Like that. So for me, that's one of the things that really struck me about what Qualia Mind did for me personally. It made me, I think in my story would be, have more mental energy at the end of my day to be a better version of myself across more of my day.
I feel like there's so much to say there.
Much to say there. Well, one of the things that kind of brought up there is, we're talking about this product, Qualia Mind, that's a part of Neurohacker Collective, who Emilio and I have both been taking probably ever since it really when it first came out, really. Yeah. And it's been such a huge thing. When you talk about energy, I think people listening are like, okay, well, energy also sometimes comes at a cost of jitters or feeling anxious or overstimulated, and so they stay away from it. What I loved so much about Qualia Mind, it was the first energy enhancing supplement I had ever taken that actually made me feel not just energized and focused, but like a better version of myself, like that I actually had more empathy and more ability to connect with others, that I just didn't feel like I was able to fully optimize, especially because I was so trying to do so much all the time. And so, for people who are high performers or very driven, I just thought it was such an amazing supplement. But I also love that you guys talk about how much dosing matters and how everybody is so specifically unique. So even on the bottle, it says recommended doses, 7 capsules. But for me, I take 3, and that's that's when I feel great. If I take more, I feel a little bit too much, but if I take, it's just a really great. So I think, there's so much to talk about here, and I didn't mean to necessarily get into the supplement too much, but I do want people to understand the difference between the kind of supplements we're talking about that Neurohacker Collective has created, comparative to, other more standard, energizing supplements out there.
Yes. And like one of the, like going back to that idea of a pyramid, right? With there's things on the bottom, there's things higher up, right? So the base is basically vigilance, right? Like being awake and alert. And so caffeine is the iconic thing that does that, right? It's why, it's so beloved in Western culture, but not only here, right? Like, tea in Asian cultures. But more caffeine doesn't move us necessarily higher and higher up the pyramid, right? It's great at doing what it does, which is, a lot of that vigilance layer, and then attention is the next level up, a very good job there. But if we take more caffeine than we need to cover those areas, then we start to have the downside of caffeine. Mm-hmm. Like, the naturopaths would say caffeineism, but irritability, edginess, like that. I remember, so I didn't drink coffee at all during my undergraduate years. And then when I went in, I was an officer in the Navy in the 80s. So when I went into the Navy, I was stationed in the San Diego area for like 6 months doing basically a school that did all kinds of training for us before we went to our first shift. And we would periodically have to stand watch in the middle of the night, or from 3:30 in the morning till school started at 7:30. And so I drew watch one night from 3:30 to 7:30, but then had to write exams that morning at 8. So I drank a whole bunch of coffee. Like literally, I think I drank like most of a pot. And since I wasn't a coffee drinker, I just remember trying to take that exam and my hands were literally shaking.
Yeah.
They were so caffeinated. And so beyond the amount of caffeine we need to kind of get into that sweet spot of that lower part of the pyramid, caffeine's not going to really do much more, right? It will then you get some of the downside without getting any more upside. So one of the things when we created Qualia Mind was to make sure that we have what I think of as the nootropic dose of caffeine, which is a lot lower than most people would think, right? It's 50 to maybe 200 milligrams. So think of it like an 8 ounce to 16 ounce cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, you're not going to really get much more nootropic benefit, but you run the risk of having a lot more of the essentially the downside effects of it. Yeah. But by adding in other things that have nootropic activity, you can start to take advantage of caffeine and then start to move more and more up the pyramid.
And I'm so glad that you're talking about this. And for those of you who are just joining us, you're tuning into Relationship Renegades on Fun for Life Radio, where we're talking to Dr. Gregory Kelly, really about a lot of things, the mind, the body, relationships, environment, and really how nootropics play a key role into becoming the best version of you so that you can show up better in your relationships, dating, business, whatever it is, and how really Neurohacker Collective and their products really stand out in terms of the holistic approach, and not just on one thing like focus or attention or anything. They really care about harmonizing a lot of the nutrition, the nutrients, and how they play well within our body. So one of the things that I wanted to chat with real quick on this subject is, I guess, just kind of also peering into my story about since 2016, that when I experiment, and I've experimented with so many nootropics, and I definitely, as a biohacker, have overdone some and underdone some, and so
Same here.
have like had moments where I'm in the toilet because I just overdid all these, and throwing up because I've just overdone things, or something was too high of dosage. And I know in your background, I think you were at Thorne Research, I believe.
Yeah, right out my last year in naturopathic school, I was their first student rep. And so I started doing trade shows for them. Thorne back then was a doctor-only company. And so it was really great. This was 95. I started to get to go to trade shows, the A4M, which is a big anti-aging one, or the environmental medicine show. And it really made it clear how good my naturopathic degree or my education was. At that point, it gave me a lot of confidence that I'd learned a lot. Yeah. And then I worked full-time for Thorne my first year out of practice, or out of school before going into practice, and then did some work with them probably off and on, for about another 6 years. I consulted for them.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really enjoyed, because whether it's Thorne or any other companies, a lot of them, when I was in my biohacking kind of journey, did make me kind of jittery and did make me kind of too much. I was either took too much, was so focused I was an asshole, or I was too jittery. I had so much energy, like I wanted to run a marathon, rather than the way that I would say I feel on it is I don't realize something until the end of the day or that week where I'm like, wow, I got a lot of stuff done. But like I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I took it. And I often feel like good habits, like bad habits, I feel like are instant gratification, and good habits are, good things take time. And I think like the way that builds and compounds over time with a good kind of holistic nootropic like this, like that's the way that I feel. It's not like, oh my gosh, I need to do, and it's, I don't think that we can reiterate that enough, because we want to incorporate in relationships good habits, whether they're mindset or product, services, technologies, whatever it is. I think that it can't be stressed enough. And so I like that you guys focus on the quality, not necessarily the quantity of things, and too much of something that just throws the body off.
And it's a person, like what you see. So like similar to you, I usually take 4 capsules instead of the 7, but I'm going to drive to Santa Barbara from San Diego Thursday. So I'll take 7 then, because it's a little bit more challenging for my brain to, be in traffic and drive the 3 hours. And, so I save the full dose personally for days that I'm going to challenge my brain more. Yeah. But I've met other people that take the full dose every day. That's what works for them. I know a few people that
or the 7 to 10 approach sometimes,
like for some, like one of our products, Qualia Life, that one 8 is usually our recommended max dose, but I'll often just take it on the days I work out heavily and then do a double dose.
Yeah.
But one of the things I believe from the complex systems is the idea of doing something like, say, a classic thing, a supplement bottle says, take this product 3 times a day, every day, right? Yeah. I don't believe that creates high performance for most things. For most things, it's the change that causes a good response. And if we do something multiple times a day, every day, what eventually we do is like we improve, plateau, worsen.
Yeah.
So that's routinely what I would see, is that if we don't do things to create change, which like our baseline recommendation for most of our products is 5 days on, 2 off, just like you would approach exercising, right? You wouldn't exercise every day, never mind 3 times a day, and think it's necessarily the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So with supplementation, I think oftentimes we get carried away with either more is better or the conventional wisdom of, well, you just do this every day. And the truth is, other than, being on a hormone or a medical reason, there'd be very few things that you would need to do every day.
But I think that's, I really want to get into that. I want people to know that was something that was so eye-opening to me when I came across you guys, because it was the first supplement company I've ever heard of that was actually creating supplementation, programs and protocols that would not just be a quick fix or like a Band-Aid, but also really help people's brains and bodies naturally create more of the good things that they needed on their own, so they don't become like dependent on things. It's actually like enhancing their health, not just, again, like a Band-Aid or a quick fix or like something like that. And so can you talk a little bit as to the mission behind that? Because some people would be like, man, well, supplement companies bank on that kind of stuff because people have to like take it their whole lives and take it all the time and reorder. And you guys are like, well, we're going to be super disruptive here and create something and be honest about those types of things.
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes, I guess, back to principles, right? So there's what we do, and then there's how we respond to what we do, right? And so you could argue which is more important, but they're both important ultimately, right? But we tend to be fixated on what we do, right? Like, and if, doing this much was good, doing twice as much is probably better. But one of the things, and again, this would be, like anyone that has great results in exercise would know this. It's the doing the exercise, but then recovering from it. If you do one without the other, you're just not going to get the same results. And so with supplements, my belief is the same. Like, you want to do and recover. And it doesn't take a long time to recover, but creating change is ultimately one of the keys to get lasting responses to things. And so we just build that into our base recommendation. And, it's what we've seen is that for our audience and ourselves, because we take the products, that works in an enduring way to continue to get the responses we want from the products. So otherwise, I think, honestly, I think you could overtrain to supplements just like exercise.
Yeah. Well, so what about people like me who are like, okay, but this helps me feel so good, so I don't want to not take it, because on the days where I don't take it, I don't feel as good. And so what would you say to people like that? Help me out, Dr. Greg.
What I would, my base case is, again, we want that contrast. One of our staff the other day was, she's playing with something called Happy. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a device you wear on your neck, right? So she's like literally, this makes me happy. Can I just do this 24/7? And it's well, it will stop working. You'll recalibrate to that level of happiness, and you won't notice more, right? It's the change in our state that helps us experience life. So it's not a bad thing to have a day or 2 days where you feel like, oh geez, I need a little bit more rest, or I don't feel like I had the degree of support I had the other days I took it. That allows you to have that support on the days that you do take it, right? Where if you take it every day, you gradually, I guess the key thing for the audience is, the one thing our brain and body are phenomenal at is adaptation.
Yeah.
So if we're not doing things to counter that tendency to adapt, then that's the baseline of what's going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Yeah.
Would be my opinion. So.
No, I love that you guys talk about this. And in here in a few minutes, we'll be breaking. If you guys are just tuning in, you're listening to Relationship Renegades on Fun for Life Radio. Where in a little bit, we're going to be asking Dr. Gregory Kelly. We're going to have a rapid fire questions to get to know him better. Every time we have people in there, we consider them our tribe, and we want to get to know them better. And of course, provide some great information to you as to how to become a better version of yourself. But before we go in there, after we, ask the rapid fire, we want to go ahead and, really talk about all the products that you guys have, whether it's the immunity, the sleep, the longevity aspect of things. And so but before we do, I just wanted to share that one of the things that I really love is that you guys have I think it's called the Foundational Guide to Neurohacking. Mm-hmm. And I love how you guys split up the interior and exterior, and then the collective aspect of things, which of course is the relationships, but also the environment. And I think, a lot of people out there, when we speak about the word epigenetics, a lot of people maybe not know what that means, but how the environment really plays a role in turning off the expression of certain genes and just how we kind of show up. And I love that you guys, whether it's in your podcast, your blogs, your supplementation, that you guys address these things. So on the topic of the collective, when it comes to the environment or relationships, what are some of the things that that you love about the company, or that you've seen that you feel like maybe in the world we live in, people need to know about?
So I would say, number one is literally everyone at Neurohacker Collective, to the extent that I can judge their capability to do their job, which obviously for some of them, I don't know what I don't know. But as a team, my read is that all of these people are just really outstanding in their jobs and roles. So that would be, I haven't experienced that in any other job setting I've had. The second thing is that legitimately people really care about each other. I feel like Neurohacker Collective is very much a family. So, it's been now many months since our office has been able to go in and work from there. And I know all of us missed that camaraderie. I just think, it's a wonderful team. And we, for whatever reason, I know when I was started working, they explained, we just look for unicorns, and we'll wait as long as it takes for that unicorn to come to us. Yeah. And so I think that mindset has helped them. It just seems like every new person that they've brought on since I've been there has just been exceptional, both as a person and in their job.
So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, well, I want to be a unicorn. How do I become a unicorn?
I mean, by taking Qualia Mind, we're getting at you turn into a unicorn. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? No.
But I mean, so I think I really would love people to understand, at least, and this is what I've come to understand, it's just health can be very complex, because everything does affect everything. And how you sleep affects how you're going to feel the next day and how you're going to respond in your relationships, and what you eat affects how you feel, and inflammation that causes comes up in your body, and even to the fact of like how you're breathing really affects how you're going to feel throughout the day, and then how you're going to respond to people and the relationships you'll be able to create, and how you're going to be able to move your body. And so I think sometimes people can talk about health and it's like, oh, well, just eat healthy and get good sleep and, you know, move your body. And those are great tools to utilize, but there's so much more to understand in that I think our education system is just so lacking. And
yeah, so maybe I can say one thing and then we can pick it up after the break. But like going back to when I was in practice and when I taught naturopathic students, like my core philosophy about health is it's not only what you do, but the relationship to that thing, right? So there's a bunch to unpack there, but quite often we judge health based on, oh, this person's doing the wrong things or this person's doing the right things. And that's just a piece of it. That relationship to why we're doing what we're doing, to me, is often way more important than what we did or didn't do.
Oh, I love that. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Like if someone...
So like, so like I wrote Shapeshift. So it's a book about weight and shape, but from a complex systems science approach. Way before I heard of Neurohacker Collective, I was into complexity science. But one of the key principles in the book is that like fundamentally dieting usually will only work till it stops working, right? Like it's like our body will adapt faster and more aggressively than we can maintain a calorie reduction. So well in advance of writing that book, I was teaching a workshop on weight loss with 2 other doctors. And it became really obvious that one of the other doctors and I would agree on almost everything to do with diet, but he thought by creating a calorie restriction and maintaining it, he could get people to any weight that they wanted. And I fundamentally thought like, well, that's ridiculous. Like in the real world, that just almost never happens, right? Yeah. So his relationship to what he was doing was so vastly different than mine. Like mine was, let's give the body more nourishment and see what new weight it defends because of that, where he thought he could control it. So like I would say my relationship, I'm in the trust your body camp and he was in the control camp, right? And so what, like, so this is when I...
Just say that one more time.
Yeah. So I would say I'm in the trust my body camp and he was in the control my body camp. Yeah. So while we made the same recommendation, our relationship to that recommendation was different. So I had one of his patients come to me at one point in tears because she'd done everything that he'd recommended. Yep. And it was a train wreck, right? She was hungry. She hadn't lost anywhere near the weight that she'd hoped for. And she felt like she was the failure. Where in my model, there was no way to win at the calorie restriction game to start with. So the foods she was eating were the right foods, or like potentially the right foods, but trying to eat them in a way to create a long-lasting calorie deficit is just not a game most people have the willpower to win. And those few that do are usually miserable, right? So it's what we do, but it's the relationship. So like a classic thing I would do with my students when I taught nutrition would be to give them this thought experiment. So, okay, we have this huge buffet, but like imagine now in the front of this classroom, there's this incredible table of everything you might ever want to have, including things maybe that you don't want to eat. So how would you know, as you walk along this, what to put on your plate to eat at this meal? And almost 100% of the time, they would be like, well, I know this is good for me and this is bad for me, right? So their food decisions were based on like a relationship, essentially saying this is good or bad. Where mine would be, if you had asked me, I would say, I'm just going to walk back and forth, and whatever my body kind of says, like, I want that on my plate, I'm going to put on my plate. And if that's coffee ice cream today, then it's coffee ice cream today, right? Now, if I was craving coffee ice cream all the time, then I would start to question, is my sleep or something else? But that like my approach was more intuitive eating, would be kind of what it was called, where theirs was thinking they can control it. So my relationship and theirs to the same behavior was very different.
Yeah.
And neuroticism over food often then comes with a cost.
Yeah.
Because we're using mental energy to now do something that could be easily done through our intuition.
Yeah.
I think there's so many people out there that have those recommendations from doctors or people or what they've researched, and they're like so stressed about like checking off every single box of what not to do, what to do, and everything like that. And then whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, there's more stress overriding the system than those actual, recommendations. And then of course, I really love the intuitive eating. So I've been practicing that and trying to get better about that for about 1.5 years now. And just being okay with like, hey, today I'm gonna be doing this, because I just feel like it and my body's like satisfied with it. And then, tomorrow I'll be like 100% healthy like I normally am. And I really feel like we should maybe continue this conversation after our break, because I think this is so key. But you did mention your book, and it's a phenomenal book. So for those that are listening, he was mentioning his book, Shapeshift book, and you can really discover how not only what he said, but whether it's inadequate sleep, chemicals, medications, body clock rhythms, movement, food instincts, and more can be tipping points for shape and weight. And most importantly, you can learn how you can do things differently so that you make improvements, and most importantly too, on how to keep those. So I think it's a great book. People should go check that out. But
absolutely, and I love this topic too. So learn it, because I want to learn for people who feel, and this is going to be after the break. We're going to leave them on a cliffhanger after rapid fire, getting into how do we learn to trust our bodies, to trust ourselves when we don't feel like we can. If I've tried so many things and they haven't worked, and I'm so scared of how many calories it is or what kind of food, because I'm so programmed with labeling good and bad, how to build more trust, and then also how that trust for self affects all of our relationships with everything. Interpersonal relationships, food relationships, relationships to the world around us. But right now we are getting into our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, baby.
All right. This is, of course, we consider every one of our guests part of the Relationship Renegades Tribe. And it's, of course, taking a break to get to know our guests better. So
in a fun way.
These are going to be some super deep questions, Greg. So here we go. First question. If you could swim in any liquid, what would it be and why, Dr. Kelly?
It would 100% be the Mediterranean. I just love the temperature of the water there, especially like that southern Spain, Andalusia area. So nothing crazy, but if I could be anywhere in any liquid, it would absolutely be there.
I thought it was going to be some kind of like nootropic fluid that we've never heard about. That'll that'll get the transdermal effect. No, but awesome. Yeah.
I grew up right on the ocean, and I'm like, I think I've swam in every ocean except the Antarctic, and that's by far my favorite. I lived in Hawaii 6 years, so it's like even better to me than that.
Well, I love
water's so key,
and especially the Mediterranean as well. So all right, rapid fire question number 2. Okay, if you could get any fortune from a fortune cookie, what fortune would you want to get?
Wow. So honestly, I think it would be one that said my mom would have many more decades of health, because she's mid-80s, and I'll definitely be it'll be a huge loss to me and many other people, when her time eventually comes. So that would be it.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful.
I think I want that for my mom and dad as well.
Same. Well, if you guys are just tuning in to this Relationship Renegades on Fun for Life Radio, Dr. Gregory Kelly one of his focuses is on regenerative medicine and anti-aging, and they do have a product that deals with longevity. So stay tuned if you're just joining us on our conversations after this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So question number 3, where were you? And well, first of all, the question is, what was your first concert? And so what was your first concert, and where were you at that time?
So I believe my first concert was REO Speedwagon, and it was Providence, Rhode Island. Would have been at their Civic Center or whatever it was.
How old are you? Just curious.
I'm 58, and so this would have been in the late 70s.
Okay.
Like before this would date you, but they had I think it was High Fidelity, they had a big hit album in 81, and I was a fan before that with You Can Tune a Piano But Can't Tune a Fish was the album.
Oh, I like that title. That's cool.
Very awesome. All
right. Last and final rapid fire question is, I actually had two I wanted to ask you, but I'm just going to pick one of them. Okay. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
It would be to learn languages, like in the Matrix, where I could just plug in and be excellent in the language. Just because it's something that I love travel, and being able to communicate even rudimentarily in a language is just a huge thing to build those relationships and really get to enjoy a place.
That is so cool. That's a great superpower. I'd want that one too.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, thank you so much for the rapid fire. We're going to get back into the questions, back into the conversation. But I think, on the topic of, superpowers.
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, Dr. Kelly, but one of our through lines. We have a couple through lines in Relationship Renegades. One of them is to always create a space where you're feeling safe, seen, heard, and loved in relationships. And of course, given that we're talking about the lead product formulator here on the show, we've really been talking about becoming the best version of you. And when you're the best version of yourself, I think you're better able to create a more safe, seen, heard, and loved container. But also, given the Superman thing that we just talked about, I don't know if you know this, but our big title is Kill Your Superman to Find Your Wonder Woman.
I did. I saw that in the invitation. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, how does that land for you? How do you take that? And what does that mean to you?
So for me, so I was a huge comic book, nerdy kid, right? I loved comics. Neurohacker recently asked all of us what the first thing we bought with our own money was. And I had a paper route, and I'm pretty sure it was comic books. I mean, it could have been candy. If it was not candy, then it would have been a comic book. And the character that I most resonated with was the Vision from the Avengers series. He was in the Age of Ultron was the movie he was introduced. Cool. And in the comics, at least when I was growing up reading the Avengers, him and Wanda, the Scarlet Witch was her tagline. They became more and more of a couple. Now, he was an android, right? So he wasn't supposed to feel. And in this one, the very last page was a big blow up, and it was something like even an android can cry, and it was then a shot of him, right? So that to me is what always sticks, right? I just love that. Even through these relationships, even this android could feel, so for me, that's he's literally a Superman, but he's somehow becoming in touch with this other side through that relationship with the Scarlet Witch. So that's what it meant when I first
started.
That's very cool.
That is so cool because, we love asking almost everybody that question because everybody kind of, brings something different with it. But at its core, it really is, basically letting go of the illusion that, of this Superman complex of trying to do everything or fix everybody or save everybody so that we can kind of let that go and realize that, oh no, we're all just human. and when we share our insecurities and our challenges and really able to better connect with people, we find that real hero within and are able to find the best partners for ourselves. Because we talk a lot about, in dating especially, and or just all relationships, it's very common for people to want to put up masks or walls or some sort of pretend version of themselves so that they seem more powerful or amazing or perfect to other people, when in reality it's just ruining all of our relationships. And so I know for sure it took a lot for me to let go of all those kind of masks and shields and facades so that I could actually find my Superman, which is this man right here, Emilio Palafox, and vice versa for him. So along with that, the story of the android, I think that same thing too, because I became kind of, I don't say robot, but you lack the ability to connect with people, really connect and really create empathy if we never share what we're actually struggling with or going through.
And I think for me, I was, this is my story at least, so it may not be true, but it's my story. So I think naturally I was one of those little kids with tons of empathy, but kindergarten, grade school, big Irish family, none of those things particularly support that. And so by the time I got into comics, there's a Simon and Garfunkel song that goes, I'm a rock, I'm an island, I touch no one touches me. So if you'd asked me like 7th, 8th grade, what song most represented Greg, I would have said, that's the song. Like, I'm a rock, I'm an island. So I was literally, I had my armor. So the vision, I think I resonated with him as a character because he was an android, right? Like, he wasn't feeling, right? More Spock-like in a Star Trek sense. And so, I think that's why that, more than any other, single comic, that scene where even an android could cry, it was like, oh, like, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to like have these other things that I didn't feel as a kid were particularly well supported. So, maybe by some teachers they were, but in general, my experience growing up in the 70s, in like a, an Irish neighborhood, being, full of empathy wasn't a great way to be not picked on, basically.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
And I love that you just talked about vulnerability, because that's obviously a component of what we talk about. And of course, in addition to what we do as a couple for Relationship Renegades with everything that we do, she loves to have kind of her women's group and me with my men's group. And, there's that big shift going on right now in the world where, toxic masculinity moving more towards kind of a healthy balance of masculinity and femininity, and being aware of that, and that it's okay for men to cry. And it's like, it's like that.
It's sexy when men cry.
But, to whatever thoughts, feelings, emotions that we have, we talk about being an optimal being, to be able to like, moving away from the hiding, suppressing, denying those things, to just like, let it out, right? Let the energy out. And I think, since we are talking about Neurohacker and Qualia, I think the fact that there's a big component on the mental and emotional capacities is just big. And so, just another kudos to what you guys are doing in relation to that.
Well, I would like to ask you, let's break down empathy a little bit, and because I think empathy is a word that, especially now, is getting, I would say, thrown around a lot more. At least in my world, it's been talked about a lot more. But why is empathy important, and how can we develop more empathy?
So I think I guess like my model, so it may not be correct, is that every human comes with like a different software install of brain skills, right? Mm-hmm. So some of us would get much more empathy, some maybe the short end of the stick, but the people that didn't get empathy will get a lot more of something else, right? So like, I think of it as a zero-sum game, and in part that gets back to the idea of mental energy, right? We only have so much, so it can only run so much software program. So I think, to me, like when I think of empathy, the key thing that separates empathy from something like sympathy is that ability to understand what someone else is feeling, but not necessarily be sympathetic, not feel that exact same thing ourselves, but be able to put ourselves in their shoes and have like a sense of what they're feeling, why they're doing what they're doing. And that, to me, is a real superpower. And in part, it's a superpower because it's underrepresented. Monetarily, things like executive functions are going to be way more rewarded in our world, right, than social cognition. And so a few of the studies I've seen on empathy, a common theme comes out, and that for most people, empathy feels like hard work, right? And in general, our brain is disinclined to do hard work. And it's going to generally, if there's a choice between this door is hard work and this one's like coasting, it's going to go in the coasting door. Yeah. And the time when that's different is if we have more mental energy. Then door number one is a legitimate option because we've got the mental energy to do it. And so one of the things that I said early on, but I come back to, it's that idea of energy. And if we can do things to produce more mental energy, we don't really have to worry about things that feel like they're harder work because we've got the capacity for it. But without that, telling someone to be more empathetic, it's really almost telling someone, all right, lose 50 pounds by eating less and exercising more. Like sounds reasonable, but you're not going to get there from here, right? Yeah. So you need that support. And I know we haven't really talked about it, but one of my journey to get healthy. So when I was in the Navy, I was the neurotic eater in the wardroom. I would have them get muesli cereal just for me, and peel all the fried coating off every fried shrimp and just eat the shrimp. And so I was the healthy eater, but I did it from a place of really being concerned about like body image, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? I exercised a lot. I tried to eat meticulously, thinking I could control how I looked. And my journey towards the end of the Navy, I completely shifted how I approached eating. And, so again, like getting to that relationship. And one of the things that helped me make that shift was so basically I struggled with alcohol in the Navy. And the Navy, paid attention, said, Greg, we're going to send you to rehab. I think it was for 4 weeks, could have been 6 weeks. This was, 1988, so quite a while ago. And I think it was at the end of my first week, they said, oh, well, by the way, we'd like to contact your parents, loved ones, just, let them know what you're going through, and so they can better support you when you come out. And I'm like, that's not happening. Like, that's just not on the menu. Literally, so this was Friday afternoon. That's all, I think of it as bandwidth. But my brain was just preoccupied that entire rest of the day, that evening, fitful sleep, waking in the morning. And that morning, I'm just like, screw it. I am never going to let something chew up my bandwidth again like that. I'm just going to deal with it. So I walked, this is way before, cell phones. So I walked to a payphone, put money in, called my parents, fully expecting my mom saying like, this is great. Like, you needed this. And my dad, who drank a lot, Irish guy, not being able to understand. And so stepping back, my dad, super hard worker, 2-hour commute each way to and from Boston, high level executive. So he wasn't the go watch his son play hockey or play baseball dad, right? Like, he just, didn't have the time for that. So I would have said I have a great relationship with my mom, not so much with my dad at that point. And, I fully thought I had them dialed in how they would respond, and completely the opposite. So my mom was, I don't get it. Like, explain again. Yeah. My dad, who'd never seen me play a single hockey game, said, Greg, I can take off work immediately, fly to where you are, get a hotel room, and I'll be there for you this whole time, right? So literally my heart broke. But what I learned is my ability to predict how people would react was horrible, right? I batted 0% in that one instance, right? So what that did is now, I don't believe in brutal honesty, but I do believe I've been rewarded for being honest about things, about, what's true for me and what I need, in ways that, I wouldn't have guessed before that experience, if that makes sense.
Especially when it comes to relationships, all relationships, honestly. Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about how to build the self-love and the courage so that you can be honest, even when it's terribly challenging and terribly scary. Mm-hmm. And that was a big thing for me. I had a really difficult time being fully honest in relationships, because I was so scared of hurting the other person, or, them thinking less of me, or them being mad at me. And so I learned the adaptation, right? Like, we talk about how adaptable we are. And on the show, we talk a lot about just the understanding of, hey, we pick up these habits, these patterns from childhood, and then they unconsciously are running the show, and we have no idea why or how that it's even going on. And so in your work with your clients and patients, and even at Neurohacker Collective, with the concept of habits and patterns that we pick up from childhood that are kind of just messing up.
Got a call that should have been off. All right, Dana, can you just pause for a couple seconds and we'll start up again?
I paused it, so we're good. So I'll just
ask it again. Yeah.
Ask that, just the end part of that question.
Sure.
What did I say? Honesty, but it was the very end part. Do you remember what I was saying there?
I was just looking at the time when you must that.
Okay, I know what I was doing. Okay. Okay, sorry, Dana, we had a call, so going back, and so on the topic of being honest, even when it's, terribly challenging, and habits and patterns that are running the show that we picked up from childhood, that are really maybe messing up our lives, and especially our ability to have healthy relationships. What have you found, or what would you suggest to our listeners that will be helpful in them finding out what those patterns and habits are and how to create healthier habits instead.
So I'm a big fan of, in like lots of people, but Wayne Dyer was someone that I really
Wayne Dyer.
And there was a something that he did, at least in the 90s, at his some of his seminars. But basically, he would ask the audience, "What happens when you squeeze an orange?" So what happens?
Yeah, orange juice comes out.
Right. So that's like you'd hear the entire audience, juice comes out, right? And then he'd say, "Well, why does the juice come out? So why?"
Because that's what an orange is.
Or I guess that's what the contents of the orange is. I don't know.
So like you guys are actually on a more correct track than his audience. Usually they would say because you squeezed it, right? But the juice was there, right? So it was both. It took the squeezing and the juice, right? So to me, the way I tend to think of things is in simple, like make things simple. But we all have juice, right? And a lot of that juice is built when we're like children, young, and we're not particularly even aware of that juice, right? But what we are keenly aware of is being squeezed, right? So what then happens is when our juice comes out, we lash out at whoever did the squeezing or whatever did the squeezing, right? So it's just more like, and this is a play on words, it's more fruitful to be aware that it was our juice. So rather than saying, hey, you need to stop doing this, the better question is like, why is it that this came out of me? And is it then something that I can work on, right? Because expecting other people to stop squeezing, like I have a good friend, she's the person I'll go up and visit in Santa Barbara, but like one of her metaphors is you can't carpet the entire world, right? Like at some point, like we have to expect the world to squeeze, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think this is such a great topic and conversation because one of the things that we talk about in Relationship Renegades is this abiding to like the law of resonance. And I think it goes hand in hand with what you were saying about, the person who squeezed us. It's like, no, we had that liquid inside of us already. And what I mean by those that maybe don't know, that are listening, the law of resonance, the best way that I can probably say it in short and in a visual, if you picture two people and inside each person, picture a filing cabinet. And from when we were born to now, and even before going there, let me just take a quick step back. So for people who don't know about like tuning forks, right? If there's tuning forks that are on the table and there's tuning fork A, B, and C. And then let's say in the other room, there's like tuning fork A, B, and C as well. And if I striked tuning fork A on the table, the other tuning fork in the other room, tuning fork A would start to vibrate, even though I didn't strike it, right? So like tuning fork A, I stroke over here, but then this one over here starts to vibrate at the same time. So given that, for those listening, let's go back to the two people, and inside each person, there's a filing cabinet. And over time, given various experiences that we've had that cause some type of an emotion or what have you, they would start to collect these tuning forks. So like if something happened with me and my dad or something, right? Like, and I was super mad or whatever, like I would acquire this, let's just call it, let's say a tuning fork, right? File it away. I'm just kind of collecting all these tuning forks that are resonant of that experience. And so I feel like we often talk about in relationships that triggers, when you're triggered, it's just a gift. And so we really appreciate when we get triggered. I mean, not all the time, because we've learned. I mean,
we try our best to get triggered.
Yeah, let's be real. Like the ego takes over and it's like, but that shift of like, okay, we know if we get triggered, there's just another opportunity to see what hasn't been healed yet within us. Yeah. And just to kind of put it back in the tuning fork, it's almost like if I get triggered by something, it's really just, there's some kind of tuning fork within me that is resonant, that is vibrating with this situation, right? Like it's like if I had trust issues, let's make this more real, and Rachel was just doing something with a friend, and if I have trust issues,
based on a past experience that happened,
based on a past experience, then that's my tuning fork that starts to resonate, right? Like that tuning fork is like vibrating, and it's like, well, once I've kind of healed that, the way that I envisioned in my mind is like that tuning fork no longer exists. So when that situation happens again, that tuning fork is no longer vibrating because I'm no longer triggered because I was able to finally heal that. And I love the juice analogy. I never heard that. But it's like, yeah, that content, that liquid or whatever, is not there anymore, if you will. And I love kind of, you know, finding different examples. So maybe, I think the juice is more simple than maybe the tuning forks, but it's such a great pillar of what we talk about, and I'm so glad that you shared that.
Well, and one last question before we break into Dr. Greg's renegade moment or breakthrough moments, which we're really excited to hear because those are always like some of our favorite segments. If someone's listening and they're like, okay, well, how do I even begin to heal a past trauma or a trigger that I know I have? If I have trust issues, or if I have jealousy issues, or if I have honesty issues, whatever that may be, like what's a powerful step for someone that wants to change, for them to actually begin that journey?
So I fundamentally believe that for most things, unless we get feedback, we just don't have, like, we need a feedback loop for most things to improve. Otherwise we just, so like as an example, this was like early 2000s when I was teaching at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. My girlfriend at the time one night just turns to me and says, you know, Greg, you say literally a lot. And I said, I do? I don't think so. And now over the next couple of days, I became aware of it, right? She created that feedback loop.
Yes.
It was crazy how much I was saying literally, like, you know, and so I, you know, now that I was aware of it, that I was able to stop doing that as much. I probably still do it. But then about 6 weeks later, again, I don't remember what the other word is. She's like, this word seems to have replaced literally. Right? And so like it was great that she was willing to give feedback because most people aren't, right?
Yeah.
But without feedback loops, it's really hard to change these things because they're just not on our radar. Like, so what I'm sure you've seen this is when someone's triggered, they'll often respond disproportionately to the event, right?
Yeah.
And often if you ask them afterwards, like maybe you'll see them, you know, yelling at their child or like a raised voice minimum, right? If you ask them after, they'll tell you that they were speaking in a normal voice routinely, right? We'll have heard it. Obviously their child would have, but their brain isn't registering it, right? So until you can create that feedback loop, there's just very limited chance that there's going to be improvement. So I think to me, the most important thing is like finding people that are brave enough to give us the feedback and then trying to at least not punish them when they do.
Yeah, well, that's why I think having coaches and mentors, and you know, or group coaching or masterminds that you're a part of, where you can really get that, is so important. I mean, I know for myself, I've worked with so many different coaches, or if you want to call them even, you know, therapists or things like that. It's so important. And so I just, you know, I love that you said that, because I think sometimes if, you know, we grow up in family or friends might not be the best people to give us that feedback, because our perception or our lens of those relationships is a little skewed, at least for me. Like if
I think for most of us, by the time we get to adults, we're reacting more to the history we have with that person than to what's going on in the moment. Like I've seen it I know I've done it, but I've seen it with really close friends, male and female, where I'll watch, you know, what occurs, and then their response is like, well, they can't possibly be responding to what I just heard.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that generated this, right? But their brain is responding to the history. So in complex system science, there's this idea of history dependence. And what it basically means is, like, Dr. Greg is not just this frozen moment in time. My response to anything I do tomorrow, exercise, a new supplement, a change in diet, you know, a person, is completely colored by my entire history that got me here. And so that's just a part of, you know, what being a complex adaptive system is, right? Which all humans are. And so because of that, when we have a history with a person or with our, you know, family members, that's going to color how we respond. So between the Navy and naturopathic medicine, when I was taking classes at the University of Hawaii, I got a job being a counselor at a teen shelter, which like, I think the only reason they hired me was because they're like, what's this crazy ex-Navy person even applying for this job for? And it was great. Like, I loved it. I stayed there for close to 2 years, and I could take classes, pretty abundantly, and got to work with, disadvantaged teenagers, basically. But one of the things that was really obvious working with them is that they would respond to things their parents did or didn't do in ways that were much larger than if I had done that same thing to them.
Yeah.
Right. And the way my metaphor was almost like an arrow. Like there's nothing to stick on if, like, I threw that sling at them or that arrow, where because of their history with that, their parent maybe, there was, right? And so it created a much bigger reaction. So, to me, I think it's hard with those relationships because, again, we're not often aware of the history we're reacting to. We would, typically say, like, it's because they did X right now, where the truth is they did X right now, but it's because this long history of how we interpret things.
When you said that, something lit off, because a question I wanted to kind of talk about, and we'll do it really quick before we get into the Renegade moment, is why a lot of times we would treat strangers better than we treat loved ones. Where we'll pay more attention to those people or give more love, and especially in a social media digital world, there's a lot of people can find themselves spending more time trying to get likes or comments or talking to people they don't know and might not never see in life than really caring about being present with, and I would say care, I think there's a certain amount of care that someone might have, but the ability to care more about the people that are actually in their lives, trying to love and support them. Do you think that what we just talked about has anything to do with why we might do that?
I think it's a big part. I think parts like with my dad, right? Like, if you had asked the pre-alcohol rehab, me calling my dad on the payphone, I would have told you, like, my dad's not going to be available. Like, he was too busy even to play catch with me. Like he's not going to care.
Wow.
And I was completely wrong, right? And so I think part of it is our reads on people that we've known longer are more likely to be skewed, right? I've changed a lot, from my early 20s till post 28 or so, when my friends joke, like, I was a walk-in. One Greg walked into alcohol rehab, another Greg walked out, right? So the things that the post Greg, would make sense to, that person's just so different than the early 20s Greg. And, I'm different now than the late 20s Greg, right? But what we do with, like, parents and siblings is we often feel like we lock them in the past somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good side of that is, for childhood friends, often we've done the same, right? Like, they may have changed in ways that aren't particularly great fits, but we still love them because we lock them in a really positive way.
Yeah.
And
So I think it's just like, with a new person we meet, it's a blank slate, both for us and for them, where we don't offer oftentimes the people closest to us that, I guess, that benefit of the doubt that they've grown and changed. And I think that's why, like, to me, it's super important. So my mom is the hub in my family, and always has been. Like, she communicates with all the kids, with all her siblings and cousins, with all them on my dad's side, right? But my mom's tendency is not to want to share challenging news, right? So if there's good news to spread, my mom's going to tell everyone. But if someone's struggling, it would not be in her nature to let other people know. She's just going to hold that to herself. And my belief is we often become closer to people through the challenges or the pseudo tragedies that life brings. And so this was when I was in naturopathic school. My youngest sister at the time, who was enough younger that, frankly, I just didn't know. When I went to college and then the Navy, she was still a little kid. And she ultimately moved with her husband to Arizona while I was in naturopathic school there. And very shortly after that, she got a call in the middle of the night from this woman saying, hey, like, you're an idiot, and I'm a bigger idiot because your husband's cheating on you with me, and now he's cheating on me with so-and-so, right? So she was devastated. Wow. And, since I was there, she shared all with me, but I was not the closest of my siblings with her just because of circumstances. And her tendency was like my mom. She was not going to let anyone know because she was, ashamed. And like you can imagine, right? It's a horrible thing to have to share. And I just said, like, you've got to share with the people that love you the most. If not for your own benefit, for theirs. That's what brings people closer, not sharing the likes and the, it's when you go through hard things with people that create the enduring bonds. And so I feel that it was good that I was there. I was able to help her with that, which, but anyways, I just think that sharing the good is easy. Sharing the things that we're resistant to share often is the more important thing to really create big leaps forward, to kind of clear up some of that juice.
Your relationships.
No, relationships, big time,
Yeah.
big time. And we know we've had those conversations within each other. Hard conversations really made us closer, but I love to even have those conversations with like men's groups that I'm a part of in building brotherhood. Like sometimes the things we don't want to share about ourselves, once they do, and it could have been something really crazy. We'll ask like the 30 plus men, let's say in these men's retreats, like how many more men trust and love this man a whole lot more? And every single hand in the room will, raise their hand. And it's like, people are wanting to build a tribe and to create a tribe and to have a tribe. And it's like, this is one of the main things on how to do that. Like we're
share the hard stuff.
This is humanity. Like share that. People don't want to connect to a
Probably. So like I use the word bandwidth a lot. Like I think we only have so much bandwidth to run all those software programs. I talked about empathy, executive functions, right? And now, like if we go back to what I said, where the Navy said, we want you to call your parents and let them know you're here, right? So since that's all I thought about now, pretty much for the next, say like 12 hours, it literally consumed all of my available bandwidth. So just with that being like consumed, there was very little to do anything useful. Right. So what I found then, and multiple times quickly in succession, after that, when I was in the alcohol rehab, that when I was pushed back against something and my mind latched onto it and started to ruminate about it, that was a clue to do whatever the hardest thing was to shut that down.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like don't take the path that's going to free up bandwidth the quickest, which is often doing what we're most dreading to do. Yeah. And like for me, I probably did within the first week after that, 3 more of those types of things. And literally that's where I said like one Greg walked in, one walked out. And it was after that 4th thing. Like I literally felt like a brand new person.
Isn't that so powerful and so interesting? And I've had literal conversations with myself. If I have a hard truth I'm trying to tell somebody all day long, all my mind can think about is how I'm going to do it. And I'll literally have full-on conversations with an imaginary person in my head.
Yeah, all of us do it.
All of us do it. So, and speaking of those hard, those hard moments or those hard truths we had to share, I'm really excited to hear your renegade moment. And so, Dr. Greg.
And just really just transformed our life. We became a different person.
Yeah. And so what is a renegade moment that you want to share with our audience?
So so I think to me, the most transformative things have been when, and this is thematically a fit, when a core relationship, I've changed my I guess like my expectations. Or so with my dad, right? Like I literally got on that phone call, like, wow, my dad loves me, which I had lots of evidence of that before that I'd somehow ignored, but I got it in that moment. And I mentioned that during maybe the next week in alcohol rehab, there was a few other things that came up that consumed my bandwidth and I just acted on them. But the final thing, and again, this gets to a relationship. So I grew up Irish Catholic, had to go to church every Sunday, CCD, and I say had intentionally because left to my own devices, I absolutely would not have gone. But like it was just, this is what you do, right? So I went to CCD, 12 years, just like I would have gone to high school. But nowhere in anything did I come away with like this, like loving God spirit. Right? Like it was, I didn't have a relationship with it, right? I had one forced on me. So what ended up happening that was really the like final thing in my journey through the, like my transition was it was a Sunday morning, and one of the things on the base that they opened up to the people that were in the alcohol rehab was going and having a meeting. A chaplain hosted it, and this particular day he showed a video. It was like a documentary, and it showed all these amazing things in nature that animals did. And one I remember was, I think it was called a kingfish, but it was a fish that would shoot a beam of water from underwater into the air and knock flies out, which super hard to do, right? Like that you're in one medium going to another one, which, anyways. So his question was like, do you think with all of these amazing things that these animals did, is there a possibility that there's a higher power? And he just kind of left it like that, right? Now, I had like kind of cut off that spiritual part of me. And so that morning, so this was probably 10:30 when that hour film and conversation ended. I went to church for the first time ever on my own, like, because I wanted to go. And I got there, I was probably 5 minutes late, so I literally sat in the very last pew in the church and said something like, God, if you're out there, just show me something, like this much, and and you got me. And the sermon that day was about the lost sheep, which is a pretty, fairly well-known one. And I literally felt like it was speaking to me, like that, the Blues Brothers, light shines on Jake and Elwood moment. That's what I felt like. Like I literally felt like, again, like my heart break and open up and feel like, oh, there is something out there, despite so for me in that moment, I created a relationship with something that I just did not have before. Mm-hmm. And that was both liberating and healing in a way, the same way it had been with my dad. So to me, what I've seen personally is the biggest leaps in my life have been with creating or healing a relationship. And there's just literally nothing, like exercise, diet, sleep, super important, right? But nothing's created that degree of shift as like changing or healing a relationship.
Wow. Beautiful. You're literally like, I'm almost in tears hearing that story. It's such a beautiful story.
I get teary telling it.
So. And obviously why we're so passionate about creating a platform really focused on relationships and how the quality of our life is really dependent on the quality of our relationships. But yet nobody was really teaching us, especially from a young age, how to do this relationship thing better or even kind of optimal. And I
think you hit it on the nail too about when we say relationships too, it's not just the relationship like between me and Rachel or someone's like a husband and wife or anything like that. It's really, it's not only intimate relationships, it's the relationship to self, relationship to others, and then the relationship to the world, relationship to God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it, this higher being, the great mystery, whatever it is, kind of what you shared.
Yeah.
We believe that, I forget who said it, love, it's one of our favorite things. Like we believe that there's miracles all around us. Two things come to mind that I want to share.
Just your ability to see it or not.
Just our ability to see it or not.
Albert Einstein.
Is it Albert Einstein? Yeah. And then I love the other one of like, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all.
Yeah.
And I just love that, like when we're open to asking those powerful questions like you did and just being open, whatever you want to call it, I feel like we'll answer if you're willing to kind of be open and hear and see and feel what's being shown. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And I love that you talked about your own personal relationship aside from and your own journey of finding that, because I think so many times, if you do grow up in a religious family, you really don't ever have the opportunity to create your own interpersonal relationship that is not dependent on what anybody else tells you. Like it's all based on your own personal experiences and your own personal everything. And so I just thank you for sharing that, and hopefully people listening really take that to account of like, regardless of your past with anything, with any sort of relationship, there is an opportunity to maybe ask different questions or be more open in the present moment. And it's just an openness to what if,
Right. I think what if's a great question. Or I think like I often would say like challenge the universe, like, show me this, or, what would it look like if this, or what would it feel like if, such and such. But I think like I love a book called The Knight in Rusty Armor. It would be like a Jonathan Livingston Seagull or The World's Greatest Salesman, like an allegory style of book. But the story is just like it would sound, right? Like it's this knight that's has gone out and he's done the Crusades and he's done all these things, and he's in a relationship and he's like, well, she's not the same woman that I married anymore, right? And so he's blaming circumstances, right? And in this really thin book, he goes out on a quest and then realizes it's him and how he's showing up that are causing her to show up the way she is, right? And so I just think, for me, I know like a key thing is if I'm not getting the responses from people close to me I want, rather than like blaming them, especially not in the moment. Like I think in the moment we're all gonna, we should forgive ourselves for reacting because we're reacting often to our history. But when we can step back rather than saying like, this mean person or why did they do that? It's like, what can I do differently? So like a story about Knight in Rusty Armor. So this was pre-naturopathic school. I was dating this woman. We'd been together like a year, had not a great, breakup. Like when are they, right? Especially at that age. And, so I blamed her and I'm sure she blamed me. But so a friend gave me a Knight in Rusty Armor. He said, I think this might be something that's worth you reading. So I read it and like really felt in a deep way, like, oh, like she did things that I wish she hadn't done. And she likely did those in part because of how I showed up, right? Like I didn't meet one of her needs. So just, I read it, that kind of dawned on me. And I just said to the universe, like, I forgive this person. Like, I feel like, like I probably have an outsized responsibility in causing her to have shown up in our relationship the way she did. And we hadn't talked, I don't think it'd been like 4 to 6 weeks, right? This is early 90s, like it was pagers, but and I want to say within like 10 minutes, my pager went off and it was her, right? So like what I've seen personally is when I do my part, it seems like the universe goes out of its way to reinforce like this was the path.
Would you say even maybe that was a favorite find of yours as we're getting into the favorite find moment? Can you say what the name of the book was one more time so people really know?
Yeah, it's called The Knight in Rusty Armor. Knight like K-N-I.
Yeah.
I would really love to read that book.
It's always,
so much of what we both found and talk about often is like how we're showing up. It's not really about the other person.
Yeah, it's always the man in the mirror or the woman in the mirror all the time, It like boils down to that.
But getting into that, what is your favorite find, Dr. Greg? Because I would love to know.
Yeah.
Recently, honestly, I have adored Ted Lasso. Like literally, I can't tell enough people about Ted Lasso.
That's true.
The best show ever.
Show.
Yeah.
Wow, we got real loud. Sorry, guys, but we have no affiliation with Ted Lasso whatsoever. We just love that.
We've been sharing that
so much.
We've been sharing that with everybody the past. I'd say like 2.5 months.
Yeah, just how if you haven't checked it out yet, it's on Apple TV, but. It's just, especially as an actress and a filmmaker, I think that is some of the most brilliant filmmaking where they've been able to teach morals and values and incredible lifestyle habits and choices in the most entertaining, fun way. So yeah, it's so awesome that you shared that.
I just adore things where people come together and their interactions make them better versions of themselves. And that just absolutely rocks in that area.
Yeah,
and for those that you don't know, again, it's Ted Lasso. It's on Apple TV.
Yeah.
Did you watch it anywhere else, or did you see it on Apple TV as well?
I saw it on Apple TV.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out. And again, guys, we have been talking to Dr. Gregory Kelly, especially about, he's done so many incredible things in his life, but especially in regards to Neurohacker Collective and all of the amazing products that they have done. And he is one of the main formulators of these products. And so, as people are listening, I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and please, share it with anyone you think might need to, or, might need to hear it, because there's so much helpful tools, tips, like, better options and choices for people. And if you are listening and you are interested in trying out any of the Neurohacker products, just use the code RR15 for 15% off of any of the products. Again, these are products and supplements that Emilio and I pretty much love, use, and swear by.
And I've been using since 2016 when we first got introduced to Neurohacker Collective. And
Yeah. So just, really grateful for you, Dr. Greg, and all that you do and all that you shared on this really powerful episode. And again, for everyone listening, this is so much more than just supplements, because again, we really didn't want this episode to be like, just, it's a huge plug on supplements, just how much lifestyle choices, better sleep, better mindsets, better relationships, better the 4 pillars that Neurohacker really talks about, along with supplementation to help you on that journey can really be so transformative. And so for everyone listening, again, RR15 to get 15% off any of the Neurohacker products. And Dr. Greg, can you just, give a quick wrap up to what makes all these products and this kind of lifestyle different than others?
I think I think health comes ultimately through, lots of foundational factors, and there's just many gaps in our diet, frankly, right? And if you're doing vegan or, some of the diets that many biohackers and people striving for health are doing, there's likely bigger gaps in certain areas, like creatine, as an example. Vegans just literally get virtually no creatine or taurine. Choline tends to be low. So one of the things I know I put emphasis on when I create our products is to make sure that gaps that are likely existing in people's diets are filled and across the board, right? And then focusing on that people are going to feel these products. So if like our Qualia Night, which is our evening nootropic and sleep product, or Mind, which you guys have mentioned early on, if people didn't feel that, if they subjectively took it and didn't notice a difference, I would feel like, all right, it's not ready to go out into the world. And one of the things that I think really separates Neurohacker is we just won't release a product until we get something that we really feel legitimately is going to make people notice a difference and be better versions of themselves. I've been in and around the supplement industry for 25 years, and that's certainly not the norm.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I know we haven't been able to mention all the products. And so for those listening, that we mentioned the Qualia Mind, we mentioned now the Qualia Night, the sleep product, which is fantastic. But they also have Qualia Immune, Qualia Life in terms of, anti-aging, longevity. And then of course, energy shots that we use, before these shows and before a lot of.
I had one
yeah, seriously, those are great
product
for travel.
Yes.
But check them out, guys. RR15 for 50% off. And as we end the show here, I also want to give my sincere gratitude for your time, energy, and presence today, Dr. Kelly, and for sharing a wealth of information, but also being raw and real about your experiences, your transformational experiences with your dad, with your relationships, and how that all just kind of tied together beautifully on the show. And I also want to thank you for your service. You had mentioned the Navy, so thank you for that. And for those that are listening, if you guys want to hear more about Relationship Renegades, go to our Facebook tribe. It's you can just type in Relationship Renegades, it'll pop up, or we have a lot of specials there for you there as well. But as we wrap up, Dr. Gregory Kelly, in addition to, I guess, how can they find you? What would you like to share in terms of how they can find you?
Neurohacker.com is our website. It has links from there to our Instagram, Facebook. I think Instagram, frankly, I'm at least led to believe is our number one way we interact with our community. But you can find me there. And then the one thing I just wanted to leave is I mentioned this earlier, that is what we do, but then the relationship to what we do. So this gets a little bit more woo-woo, but when I take Qualia Life, which was formulated to make sure we do a lot to support mitochondria, these cool things that make cellular energy. So one of the things I do is before I take it, I basically say, hey, mitochondria, we're going to be taking Qualia Life, do what you need to get the best response to this, right? So it's a little woo-woo, but I talk to my body a lot. If I'm going to travel, fly from San Diego to southern Spain, a couple of days before, I'll tell my body, hey, by the way, we're going to do this, and we're going to go across 8-9 time zones. You've done it. I know you can do it. You'll do your best. You let me know what I need to do to support you. So with me, that's that trust your body that I talked about earlier. I communicate with my body all the time, letting it know what's happening, challenging it, with like, can you do even more? And when it does, thanking it, right? So to me, like a core thing of relationship, parents, spirituality, but also with ourselves. And just like any other healthy relationship, letting it know what's expected, giving it the benefit of the doubt, and thanking it when it shows up in ways that are really cool.
Gosh, I'm so happy that you ended on that. I hope everybody really hears that. And even if it feels a little weird at first, there is this feeling when you talk to your body, especially in a way of, gratitude. It's a deep feeling that I don't feel like I've ever felt before, especially like putting your hand on your heart, one on your stomach, and just being like, thank you, body, for all that you do for me. There's this experience, that I feel like is not found any other way. And so, especially with people who, are having body image issues or weight loss issues or any aches and pains issues, it's that relationship with our body, allowing that little bit of woo-woo-ness in there, or weirdness, because as soon as you start doing it, like, just try it out. Like, you'll feel it. You'll want to keep doing it. So I think that's just so important. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for everyone listening, and to Neurohacker Collective as a whole, for all the things that you guys do to make this world such a better place. I literally I don't believe I would be here in the form that I am as a healthy woman without you guys, without the education, without the support that you guys have given me. So obviously I just want to share that with the whole world, that there is hope, regardless of your past and or other, just anything you've been through, there's hope for healing. It's just you have to put in the time and the work and be curious about it. And so thank you so much, Dr. Grace, for being here with us, for sharing all that you shared. Again, if you're interested, RR15 for 15% off of all the Neurohacker products. And please feel free to leave us any questions in our tribe, Relationship Renegades Tribe, and or for Dr. Kelly at Neurohacker Collective. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Dr. Kelly. We will see you guys soon on the next episode. Again, you've been listening to Relationship Renegades on Fun for Life Radio. We will see you next time.
See you guys.